What exactly does this particular jury note that came out yesterday mean for Diddy and his RICO charges? Could it possibly mean that they've already found him guilty on the most serious of crimes? And we have your update in regards to more jury notes coming out in day two's deliberation of the Sean Diddy Combs trial.
Here we go now.
Welcome back to the Kempire channel, your number one source for pop culture news and music, entertainment, reality TV, and so much more. As always, be sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so you never miss out on breaking news when we go live or when we upload. Today's video is brought to you by our friends over at Factor Meals. As you know, with covering the Diddy trial, it's kept me incredibly busy. Not only am I covering the Diddy trial, we are covering other lawsuits like Tyler Perry or recapping some of your favorite shows like Real Housewives. So being over a hot stove during the summer is not my ideal place to be, but our friends over at Factor Meals gives you a dietitian-approved, chef-crafted meal with all kinds of add-ons, and they make it so easy this summer. They say summer is here, more sun, more light, more time to do all the things that make summer so special. And the number one thing you don't want to be doing all summer is spending hours cooking inside. That's where Factor comes in. Factor Chef's crafted, dietitian-approved meals are ready in just 2 minutes. Take the hassle out of eating well. Get started at factormeals.com/Kempire50off and use code Kempire50off to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. That's code Kempire50off at factormeals.com/Kempire50off for 50% off plus free shipping. Factormeals.com/Kempire50off. More information will be available in the description. So earlier today, we had a video with Kirsten Brown, a Los Angeles prosecutor. This is our third collaboration with her because we wanted to go through the verdict sheet, unpack some of what played out in the closing arguments, and more. But one of the things that we talked about was this jury note. So several notes went back to the judge yesterday, and I just want to highlight some of what that included. So one of the things that it included in note 1 was the choice of their foreperson. This is practical reasons. This is what they normally do. Note number 2, questioning of the juror's ability to follow instructions. That was coming out yesterday that there was a particular juror, I believe juror number 25, that didn't seem to be able to follow instructions, and they wanted the judge, Judge Aaron Subramanian, to have a conversation with him. Based on what we've heard, the judge had a conversation with him and all was good. They went back to deliberations. Not sure exactly what that means. Again, my collaboration with Kirsten might give you a little bit better understanding of the possibilities of what that could mean. Also, what it could mean when it comes to an appeal later if he's convicted. Note number 3 that went back to the judge says, how to understand narcotics distribution allegations. So I want to highlight ABC News' video that they did yesterday in covering this particular note. So let's just get into some of what they were saying in their video because they also elaborate about this. I also talked about this with Kirsten because we also went through the verdict sheet. So before we get to my conversation with Kirsten, let's take a listen to what ABC News, Eyewitness News had to say about what was playing out in day 1 of the jury deliberations in the Diddy trial.
Good evening. I'm Mike Marza. Day 1 of deliberations in the Sean Diddy Combs trial now in the books. And there were some fascinating developments on this day 1. The jury sending 4 different notes to the judge, a couple just procedural, but a couple also with some interesting, maybe backstory to them. The first indicated that they had selected a foreperson. That is part of the process. The second, very interesting, as the jury questioned one of the jurors' ability or willingness to follow the judge's instructions. We're going to get more into that in just a moment. And then
it's the willingness part to me that was kind of concerning, and I'm sure probably concerning for Diddy's defense team as well. Something that they could probably later bring up in regards to an appeal.
Third note was about how to understand narcotics distribution and the allegations surrounding that. Something that the judge and the jury will tackle first thing tomorrow morning. The fourth note was about wrapping for the day and returning tomorrow morning. The judge saying all along that the jury will be able to make their own schedule. They finished around 5 today. We'll be back tomorrow at 9 a.m. In just a moment, we're going to be joined by ABC News legal contributor Bernarda Villalona to dig deeper into everything that unfolded in court and during the deliberations. But first up, Darla Miles with a recap from Lower Manhattan.
The first day of jury deliberations in the Sean Diddy Combs racketeering and sex trafficking trial off to an eventful start, even though it wasn't a full day. Combs' 3 adult sons and teen daughters in court today, as well as other relatives, and his 84-year-old mother, who has attended almost every day of the trial. Deliberations beginning at 11:19 after a 2-hour reading of jury instructions. All 12 jurors and 5 alternates with their eyes laser focused on the printout, seeing following back and forth on the page line by line. The 62-page document.
62 pages. 62 pages that they had to go through. This is why I say it's so important when it comes to jury selection, but more importantly, the jury instructions. And we talked about what the prosecution wanted included in these jury instructions. This is part of the reason why so many people were wondering, why would they remove certain allegations, not charges. He's still facing 5 charges, which is what we discussed with Kirsten in the video from this morning. There were just certain allegations just to make it easier. And mind you, to say make this easier, if they included this probably 62-page document, would have been longer.
Telling jurors to evaluate the evidence carefully and to resist jumping to any conclusions based on personal likes or dislikes, gut feelings or sympathies. The first note coming back quickly, which is not uncommon at all, saying, "We have elected juror number 5 as our foreperson." Then a second note after lunch saying, "We are concerned juror 25 cannot follow your honor's instructions. Can you please come out and speak with him?" The court sending a note back to the jury room, reminding them to follow his instructions to follow the law. The directive apparently helpful after a few more hours of...
That part is really concerning, that the judge had to speak with juror number 25 in regards to making sure that he's following the instructions, meaning that he's following the law, meaning that he's following what they have laid out in these jury instructions.
Deliberations, the foreperson sending a third note about page 37 of jury instructions about drug distribution. That's one of the underlying crimes for the racketeering count. Deciding if giving drugs to Cassie and Jane during freak-offs was a criminal act. And while jurors only need to find that Combs coerced the 2 women into participating just one time, they have to be unanimous on which one.
In sidebar, we talked about unanimity and how it was brought up in the prosecution's jury instructions, what they wanted included in the jury instructions. They did not get their way. So Kirsten explained the fact that they had to come to a unanimous decision on that actually is not a good thing for the prosecution.
And deliberations resume tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. He also told jurors to return with an open mind. In Lower Manhattan, Darla Miles, ABC 7 Eyewitness News.
And our thanks to Darla for that recap. Joined now by ABC News legal contributor Bernarda Villalona to talk about this day 1 of deliberations. It feels like, it's been a marathon to get here. So here we are. I want to first off talk about this juror situation this morning. So the second note, and the foreperson said, something to the effect of, you got to come get this guy because he's not following what you want him to do. What do you make of the way it was worded, one, the way it was worded, and then 2, what do you think is going on in that jury room?
So at least because that juror, the foreperson, signed that note, doesn't necessarily mean that the foreperson was the person who wrote the note, is that they are jurors that are taking their oath seriously in terms of what are their directions, what are their instructions when it comes to deliberation. But I'm so surprised that so early on that you get a note like this, because usually when it comes to jury deliberations, it can become heated. Words can be exchanged. People start screaming. I've had jury deliberations where pretty much jurors have almost gone to blows doing deliberations, because you have to think that these jurors have been together for 7-8 weeks. They've heard from 34 witnesses. They heard hours and hours of closing arguments. And then this morning they heard over 2 hours.
And hence why today in day 2 of their deliberations, they're asking for transcripts from testimony like Cassie Ventura's testimony. Again, remember, you heard Cassie's testimony at the very beginning of this trial.
Hours and change of jury instructions. So there's so much to talk about, and people may be stuck also in their emotions and their feelings and have already dug their foot in the sand and say that, look, this is how I feel, and maybe I'm not going to move away from that. But we don't know. The note is still very vague. I'm curious to see whether they're saying that he doesn't have the ability to follow the instructions, or is it that he's choosing not to follow the instructions? So it's either he doesn't understand, doesn't comprehend, or he's saying that I just don't, I'm
And it's not impossible that he might not comprehend these instructions. 60 something pages of instructions, and it's the law. So you're asking laymen to come to a decision based off the law. These are not attorneys.
Not willing to follow these instructions no matter what you tell me to do. But it seems that they worked it out because they were back deliberating for another few hours, and another note in regards to his actions didn't come from the jury.
Yeah, that note about the juror came in about the 70th minute mark, so they were deliberating a little more than an hour before that note came in. So the second note of note, if you will, the second one that really meant anything today was this about narcotics distribution. What can we glean from that?
Pay attention to this.
So specifically, I think it says, if an individual asks for a controlled substance and the person hands it over, is it distribution? So a couple things that we can glean from that question. Number one, you don't get to the predicate acts to drug distribution unless you have already found that there's already racketeering conspiracy, that it's actually been.
This is what I discussed with Kirsten yesterday, because we were going through the verdict sheet, and we literally, I saw this beforehand and I had mentioned it to her. But as we were going through the verdict sheet, it tells you clearly, it says, count 1, racketeering conspiracy. This is the count that, first of all, has the life sentence attached to it. But also, this is where so many people, laymen and some attorneys, we've talked about some of those attorneys, including Sunny Hostin from The View, who was a former prosecutor. She doesn't necessarily believe, based off of the evidence, that they've proven RICO here, because this is very different type of case that a lot of attorneys haven't seen before. But in count 1, it says, how do you find the defendant? Not guilty, guilty. Then it says, under the predicate acts, it says, if and only if you find the defendant guilty of count 1, which types of racketeering acts do you unanimously find were involved in the offense? So this is important to know. Why are you asking about distribution? Because distribution is on the second page of this verdict sheet. It's the last one. So if you're asking for clarification on that, we're already here where allegedly, again, we're speculating. How did we get here? Why are we deliberating on drug distribution in this particular area unless you've already determined that he's guilty? You're not even supposed to answer these if you've said that he's not guilty. Again, they could just be getting ahead of themselves. They could just be wanting clarification on all of the different acts before making a final determination. There are no rules in regards to that. They can decide whenever. They could be just making sure they have a full understanding before proceeding with guilty or not guilty. But if we were to assume here, you would think, okay, so we're going through the predicate acts and we're already on the last one, and you want clarification on that one, it might make us assume that they've already found him guilty on RICO, the biggest charge that he's facing. But let's take a listen to what an attorney is saying.
Proven. You don't get to the predicate acts. You don't start talking about the predicate acts unless you have decided, 1, that there was an enterprise, and 2, that there was an agreement. So I find it fascinating that they've already gotten there. But again, we don't know whether it's just one juror who has that question, or a few of the jurors that have that question, or actually all 12 of the jurors have that question. But also in terms of what predicate act that they're asking this question of, remember doing closing arguments, the prosecution said that if you find 2 independent drug distribution acts, then you can find him guilty of the racketeering conspiracy. So 2 independent times where Sean Combs distributed narcotics to someone, and it can be, you can ask me for drugs, I give you drugs, and that's possession with intent to distribute. It can be that easy, even by you asking me for it. It's that easy when it comes to making out that count.
And if you remember Cassie's testimony, again, probably why they're asking today for Cassie's testimony, she did talk about asking for drugs because she claims that she needed it in order to do these marathon freak-offs.
So it's so much that you can look into it. I would be nervous if I was the defense to see a question like that, because again, you must be that you have reached a decision as to that there was an enterprise, a criminal enterprise, an agreement to engage in predicate acts.
Yeah, and count one, racketeering conspiracy, faces up to life in
Up
prison.
to life. That's
This
the
is-
most serious one.
It's a big deal. And then the other four deal with sex trafficking.
With this.
So take me through the process, because this is day one, and I'm interested to know, and I think a lot of people maybe watching this too would be interested to know, what happens when the jury goes into that room for the first time, the door shuts behind them, and for the first time in weeks, they are able to talk about this case?
Absolutely. So you got to think, once the jury starts deliberating, and these are the 12 sitting jurors, because the alternate jurors are no longer with this jury. So you have the 12 sitting jurors that are inside of a room, and while they're inside of that room, they don't have access to internet. They don't have access to their phones. Their only communication to the outside world is by sending a note through the four-person. They have pages that are numbered. They write out their note, whatever it's a question, it's an instruction, or saying that they want to leave by 5. The four-person signs it, dates it, times it, and then they knock on the door and they give it to whoever the courtroom deputy is or the courtroom marshal that's standing by the door to take whatever notes that exist.
We talk a lot about this with Kirsten as well, but I know sometimes taking in 2 hours of information, some things get lost. This is why I'm repeating and talking about this process, because a lot of us, even if we follow this case, sometimes we forget some of the process. And also, some of the cases that we follow are civil or at state level. Things that are done at the federal level a lot of times are very different.
So when they're inside that room, the 12 deliberating jurors, the first thing that they do is that they select who the four-person is. And that's exactly what happened. That was the first note that the court received today, announcing that there is a four-person, and juror number 5 is a four-person. Now, we don't know whether it's actually the sitting juror number 5 or whether it's a juror who had the number 5 when they were originally selected. So we're unsure as to who exactly the four-person is. The four-person doesn't have any more power or decision-making than any other person. The only thing is that the four-person, one, announces the verdict if there's a verdict, and 2, signs whatever notes that are sent out for the judge. But once we move on from there, the jury right now, they have access to a laptop that has the evidence on it. They also have the written jury instructions. So that's another thing that's like ringing a little bell in my head, because you have the jury instructions. So for them to have asked about the possession with intent to distribute, they want more clarification.
And when we asked this of Kirsten said that more than likely the judge will just refer them back to the jury instructions. But it will be interesting to see why that question was brought up yesterday.
So with the jury instruction, the evidence, and I believe they may have some transcripts or some testimony. I'm not sure if they have all of the testimony with them. They get to talking. 12 strangers that do not know each other now get to discuss finally.
They couldn't remember. They could not discuss this case. So when they would take lunch breaks and things like that, they would have to talk about everything else but this case. Remember, this jury was also not sequestered. They were just told not to discuss this case with anyone. Did they follow those rules? That is our hope, but you can't control that. Literally, you can have these conversations or overhear conversations on the train about this Diddy trial, especially here in New York, where Diddy is from.
The evidence that they've heard, they get to talk about Jane and Cassie and these videos and what they think about the case and what evidence they found credible. Was there an arson? Hey, Kid Cudi, you saw him testify. Famous singer, rapper, you saw him testify. What do you think about what he testified to? Capricorn Clark, what do you think about what she testified? Oh, 2 entertainers also testified in this case. What do you think about that? I think also you get these jurors that remember throughout the whole trial, they were also taking notes, because each one of them were given a notebook and they were taking notes throughout the trial. But the judge in his instructions specifically say that their notes don't carry more weight than what the transcript actually says. So the transcript is what's binding, not any juror's particular notes.
How often do they kind of take a straw poll and say, where is everybody at?
They probably already did. I think that's probably where.
We talked about this with Kirsten as well. Again, the rules for them, they set up their rules. They set up their schedule. And she says, don't be surprised that they all went in there with a plan on when they're going to come to a verdict, where they stand already on some of the counts. Again, this is up to them.
They got to that one juror that had an issue or has an issue with deliberating.
So they basically go through the 5 counts.
It's quite possible.
Count 1, what does everybody think? Vote, and then assume, obviously they haven't reached a verdict yet, so there was some disagreement. So then when they operate, so tomorrow morning they'll come back at 9 a.m., get some clarification on, both sides are still trying to figure out what to even say to them,
What
right?
to say to them. So the prosecution wants this judge to tell the jury that what was on the mind of the person that received the narcotics shouldn't play any role as to the possession with intent to distribute. So whether someone asked for it or didn't ask for it, it doesn't affect the elements of possession with intent to distribute.
And the defense is still trying to work through what they want.
Trying to figure it out, yes. But also, by them asking that question, the defense can also glean, they're taking into account whether Jane or Cassie actually wanted it, because remember, when we're asking about whether a person wanted it, we're going into the sex trafficking and about whether this sex was consensual. So you probably do have one juror that's taken that into account as to the consent of both these women.
It's so tough to know how long these
It is.
go,
It
right?
is.
But do you have any gut feeling on where we're at with the process?
A case like this is difficult. And the reason that it's much more difficult than another RICO case is because of the defendant. And you're dealing with a celebrity who once had the key to New York City.
Literally.
Literally.
Given by Eric Adams, who was once indicted, but conveniently has no longer been indicted by the SDNY.
Known throughout the world. So I think that plays a huge role. It's almost like putting extra weight on the prosecution that, no, it's beyond all doubt. You have to prove it. And of course, that's not the standard. It's beyond a reasonable doubt. Yeah. So much plays into it, because also you got to think that because this is Sean Diddy Combs, people on the jury can be like, no, this is not what he should go down for. It should have been state charges. He shouldn't have been charged with racketeering charges. That, the government is targeting him. They should focus on other crimes, not this. This is something that's petty. You just never know what's on the mind of these jurors.
Yeah, because part of the jury instruction, the judge told them, you are the ultimate trier of the facts.
That's right. The most important people in that courtroom right now, Mike, are those 12 jurors. It's not the judge, it's not the government, it's not the defense attorneys. It's those 12 jurors. Those 12 jurors are ultimately going to decide the fate of Sean Diddy Combs.
And you got the sense of the weight of it all.
Again, the importance of why they were fighting for certain jurors to be on this jury, and why they were fighting for juror number 6. And they fought so hard, and so that possibly if they have to appeal this, that will be brought up in that 14 pages that we read through like a week ago. This is part of the reason. We talked about this with Kirsten as well. This is part of the reason why they fought so hard, because if the possibility does come up that he's convicted, they want to bring these issues up upon appeal. The responsibility that these jurors have is huge when you think about it. And you can understand why Diddy's body language, according to people that were inside the court this week, why he seems so nervous. He's tapping his leg all day yesterday.
When we heard earlier that Sean Combs and his family appeared to be praying together yesterday, and bowing their heads as the jury set out on this very important decision, and they're back tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. We appreciate your perspective.
Yes, we appreciate it. Guys, as always, we're citing our sources, ABC 7 Eyewitness News here in New York City. Let's talk about day 2 of the deliberations. But before we do that, don't forget the Kempire After Dark, the Villain Era, is coming to Philadelphia on July 10th. It's our first summer date that we are going to be talking about stories like Diddy. We'll be talking about Real Housewives of Atlanta and Miami, and whatever hot topics that might be on your mind. You will also be able to ask me questions and things like that. It's going to be a fun night. Alexander Rogers will be opening up the show for us as well. And then we're coming to Atlanta on August 5th at the City Winery there. Then back in DC on August 22nd. And then back here in my hometown of New York City. All shows have meet and greets available, but the New York City show has a live stream available. So even if you're in another part of the country or another part of the world, you will have access to the live stream option. And what I say in Philly, Atlanta, or DC won't be what we talk about come September. I don't know what we will be talking about, but it will definitely be a fun time. Get your tickets today. More information on the Kempire After Dark. The Villain Era tickets will be available in the description, along with everything else Kempire, including our merch. Let's get into day 2 of the Sean Diddy Combs trial. And look, I'm doing this in the afternoon. There might be other developments that come out. We'll do a separate video or we'll talk about it tomorrow. Literally, I just wanted to give you an update on what happened yesterday and what's happening today. According to NBC News, who we've been utilizing covering this story and giving you your summaries, there is a Diddy trial playlist for those that maybe just want to hear everything from the beginning. And while this jury is deliberating, you can hear that on or watch that on the Kempire YouTube channel. You can also hear our summaries on the Kempire podcast. The podcast actually has a few extended versions because of additional content that we ended up getting after we did the video. So NBC News says that the jury returned to the jury room today for day 2 of the deliberations after completing 5.5 hours yesterday. They sent 4 notes to the judge, as we mentioned, including a question about drug distribution, which the judge will answer after conferring with the attorneys. They went directly to the jury room and began deliberations at around 9 a.m. The jury sent its 5th note at around 10:27 a.m. this morning. Prosecutors and defense attorneys returned to the courtroom where they all looked at their phones and conferred about the note. Prosecutor Maureen Comey went to the defense table to chat with defense lawyer Tenny Garagos. Prosecutors were chatting and taking notes as the defense seemed huddled near the court artists. Janice Combs has arrived as we wait for the jury's latest note to be read aloud. She has been waiting in the 8th floor cafeteria. She's been there for the most part almost every single day. The daughters have been coming to court as well. The sons have been coming sporadically. I heard that Justin probably has been the only one that's really come almost every single day. So according to NBC, they said the jury requested transcripts this morning of testimony given by Cassie Ventura and Daniel Phillip, a S worker who was hired for freak-offs with Combs and Ventura. They asked specifically for Ventura's testimony about the March 2016 Intercontinental Hotel assault, about when she and Combs were at the Cannes Film Festival and its aftermath, and about her freak-offs with Phillip. The note also asked what Phillip told the court about a freak-off at Essex Hotel. Comey told the judge that they reached an agreement on that Phillip testimony and one of the sections regarding the Cannes incident, though there was a dispute over where to cut off the events after the incident. The prosecution added that they are working through the testimony on the Intercontinental Hotel. So these are questions I would have for Kirsten in regards to why don't they just get the full amount, but I guess this is where both sides have to agree upon how much information they're going to share with the jury in regards to this, even though the jury has heard all of this testimony. But I guess it also makes sense in regards to now the new jury instructions and what's relevant as per the jury instructions. So the morning started with a heated debate on yesterday's jury question about a specific aspect of drug distribution. Both sides took the notes as critical opportunities to influence the response. A note came in yesterday just before court closed for the day, as you know, asking whether an individual is considered a distributor if they gave substances to someone who asked for the drugs. Prosecutors pointed to lines on page 37 of the jury charge document, the jury instructions, which said that distributing, quote, simply means to deliver, to pass over, or to hand over something to another person. I don't know how you feel about that, but that doesn't necessarily look good for the defense. Combs is not charged with drug distribution specifically, but possession with an intent to distribute is considered a predicate crime within the RICO charges. Defense attorney Mark Agnifilo argued that the answer didn't go far enough, but the judge, Aaron Subramanian, ultimately sided with the government on what to send back. He says, "I just listened to you and I have heard what you said," Subramanian said to Agnifilo. "I don't think your concern has any basis." And if you missed it, our conversation in regards to the closing arguments with a prosecutor, Kirsten Brown, it's worth listening to. It's worth watching that interview because her perspective on both the defense closing arguments and the prosecutor's closing arguments is very interesting. So according to NBC News, they said the prosecution and defense went back and forth over what parts of Ventura's testimony regarding the March 2016 assault she endured from Combs at the Intercontinental Hotel should be sent back to the jury. Combs' defense wanted to include messages between Combs and Ventura leading up to the hotel visit in which they were coordinating a freak-off. Still, prosecutors wanted it limited to the incident at the hotel itself. So now we're understanding why they have to discuss what is sent back to the jury. Both sides went back and forth until the judge suggested offering the jury Ventura's entire testimony transcript. Emily Johnson, one of the government's attorneys, told the court that the prosecution had no problem with this, because we've said this with our collaboration with Kirsten. We've talked about this in the summary, that Cassie's testimony was pretty strong in comparison to Jane's, and probably the strongest of all the testimonies. So Emily Johnson, one of the government's attorneys, told the court the prosecution had no problem with this, but Combs' lawyer, Tenny Garagos, pushed back. Garagos argued that the entire testimony, which is 800 pages long, would be too overwhelming for the jury. They also know the strength behind Cassie's testimony. But I agree, 800 pages is a lot. And they also don't want the jury deliberating past the holiday. And I don't know if you realize this, I learned this today. The court is closed on Thursday. So that is also limiting the amount of time. And according to my texting with Kirsten, she says that puts a lot of pressure on the jury, but also on the defense. They're not liking that. So they said eventually they agreed to send a portion of Ventura's testimony that would include the text before and after the hotel assault. An Instagram post Ventura made after CNN released the video of the hotel assault will also be given to the jury. Sumarini ordered that it be ready for the jury by 1 p.m. Eastern. Combs sat with his defense team this morning wearing light pants and a light sweater, appearing a little bit on edge as the day began. Can you blame him? His life is in the balance here, especially when we are talking about the conversations around count 1 in the drug distribution. If they're discussing one of the predicate acts, it's like, oh, what does this mean? So he waved to his family and blew kisses to his mother, Janice, as she sat in the second row. Combs leaned over to speak to her later in the morning after both parties had argued over how to answer a question from the jury. Just relax, it's going to be all right, Ma, Combs told her. He added, I like your shirt, your outfit. She's been dressing up. She's definitely been dressing up. You would never know if you looked at Janice Combs that she's an 80-something-year-old woman, which I can appreciate dressing up. But at the same time, some people speculate that did she create the depraved man that we've learned about in this court case? She's not on the stand. I will always remind you guys of that. I always say the bigger crime here are those wigs. We had to have a light moment, couldn't we? Couldn't we? Guys, there will be more updates. This is just the update based off of day 2, early afternoon of the jury's deliberations. There, at this particular time, has not been a verdict. They were asking for more testimony from Cassie Ventura, and it looks like both the defense and prosecution came to an agreement to how much they want to share. Not the entire testimony, which is 800 pages. Again, if you missed our conversation with Kirsten Brown earlier this morning, it premiered. Be sure to check it out. It will give you a lot of clarity on the closing arguments, what we've seen so far, and what we can expect later. Let's continue this conversation in the comment section. As always, don't forget to like this video. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on your notifications so you don't miss out on breaking news when we go live or when we upload. And when the verdict comes in, as long as I am home or near a computer, I will be going live for the live reading of the Sean Diddy Combs verdict in this federal trial. Thank you guys so much for watching, and as always, for listening.
Here we go now.